When it comes to making a great beat, having a fire melody only gets you halfway there. The real magic happens when your drums hit right. The drums are what give your beat energy, bounce and personality, but let's be honest, it's not always easy to make your drums sound as unique as your sample. That's exactly what this video is about. Today I'll break down how to make your drums stand out, how to make them hit harder, and how to build a unique bounce that fits perfectly with your melodies. I'll show you real examples from my own projects, so you can actually see how these techniques work in context, not just theory. And don't worry, I'll cover both creative tricks to make your drums sound original and simple technical steps you can use right away to level up your mixes. So make sure to watch until the end, you don't want to miss any of these. Alright, enough talking, let's get straight into it. The first step that always works for me is to listen carefully to the sample I want to add drums to. While listening, I try to imagine a bounce inside my head. This prevents me from just dropping the same drum patterns again and again. For example, when I listen to this sample, I instantly imagine an acoustic sounding snare drum that would match its tone. After finding the right snare, I kept it simple by laying down a classic pattern on the 2 and 4. That already gave me a base to imagine the next drum layer. In this case, I heard a hi-hat hitting in 1/8 triplets. So I quickly laid down the pattern, and with just 2 drum elements I could already feel the bounce. To make these two sounds feel like they are being played in the same room, I applied a similar reverb on both. Especially the hi-hat blended in much better after that adjustment. While we are talking about hi-hats, most of you probably already know this, but for those who don't, you can make your hi-hats sound groovier by simply pushing up the swing knob a bit. This way, they'll play slightly off-grid, which makes them sound less robotic and gives them a more natural feel. In the next step, I always try to listen for the gaps left by the existing drum elements. Once I notice those spaces, I imagine another element that could fill them. In my example, I noticed the space between the snare hits and decided to fill it with an open hat. Listen to how every element has its own grid, where no other element is playing. The same goes for the snare I added later in the beat. After that, I added a simple kick pattern and the drums for this beat were finished. Take a listen. For the next tips, I've got another project to show you. Here I want to focus more on mixing and processing the drums. The main issue that often ruins drum sound is poor level balance. This happens when each drum sound isn't leveled properly, which leads to a lack of clarity. If you're struggling to level your drums by ear, I've got a solid solution. This mixing guideline gives you an orientation for what levels each drum element should have. I suggest taking a screenshot of it so you can reference it whenever you mix your drums. This really helped me back in the day when I couldn't quite hear the balance myself. But in the long run, I definitely recommend training your ears to notice level differences. That way, you can mix based on your own taste rather than relying on a chart. Now that we've covered mixing, let's get back to creative tips to make your drums more interesting. Take a listen to the next beat. You may have noticed how wide and full the drums sound, and if you didn't, listen to them soloed. This drum section includes 3 different hi-hats, each with a different pattern. The first one plays a basic 1/8 rhythm. Nothing special, but I pitched it down a few semitones to get a darker tone. Together with the second and third hi-hats, they cover a wider frequency range than a single one could. This creates a slightly chaotic feel, which is exactly what I wanted. Another thing I did was panning the hi-hats differently. The lower one is panned slightly to the left, the higher one to the right. This is a really underrated way to make hi-hats sound wider and give them more presence in the stereo image. The same panning trick applies to the open hats in this track. The original pattern sounded pretty plain, so I bounced one open hat to audio and reversed it in the region settings. Listen to how much more variety that adds. I panned the reversed head to the left and positioned it to create a call and response effect between the open heads. To show you that you can reverse pretty much anything, take a listen to the outro of the beat. I bounced two hi-hats together with the clap and reversed that combined audio. Then I added a halftime effect and an automated high cut, resulting in this really cool outro. Feel free to share more ideas on how to use this technique in the comments. Let's move on to the third beat. In this one, I want to show you how easy it is to keep your drums interesting throughout the track. Listen to the first part. The clap pattern is as basic as it gets, leaving space for the snare to make it bounce. But in the second drop, the snare disappears and the clap pattern changes up to keep things fresh. The snare roll at the end of every 8 bars also prevents the beat from sounding repetitive. Another way to keep your beats engaging is by sprinkling in unusual effects or percussion sounds. In this example, I used the sound of breaking glass, reversed it and used it as a transition effect. To make it fit, I added some reverb and a low cut EQ to prevent clashing with the 808. I just like making sounds work that at first don't seem like they'd fit in the beat. Now for the most important part of this video, processing. I like to route all my drum sounds into one bus, so I can apply effects to them all together. Let's go back to the second beat to show what I mean. I start with a simple EQ, rolling off the low end to keep it from clashing with the 808. Since we want our drums to cut through the mix and sound as crisp as possible, I suggest using fresh air to boost the highs. Honestly, I recommend fresh air for almost every section of the beat. It even works great on melodies. Just be careful not to overdo it, since that can cause volume jumps and mess up your mix balance. Use it subtly to enhance the harmonics. If you just use EQ and fresh air, you've already done a solid job processing your drums. Of course, you can push it further. For example, by adding saturation to give your drums more color. Again, keep it subtle to maintain the overall balance. To switch things up, I sometimes automate effects like Bit Crusher to activate only at certain points. For example, at the end of every 8 bars. This gives the drums a completely new texture for a moment before returning to normal. You can automate any effect this way. Bit crushing is just one example. I'd love to hear your creative ideas on this, so leave a comment below to share how you use automation in your drums. That's it for today's video. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You know how it goes. Thanks for watching and see you next time.